everybody. I've been so busy recently going to car meets that I haven't actually had time to sit down and make any more videos. But this is what I've been wanting to do since pretty much when I first got the car. Now, we all know cars don't just fall from heaven and land right here in our garages. It'd be nice if they did, but that's not how life works. So usually when somebody decides to bring home a car that's several decades old and is highly impractical, there's usually a reason behind it. In my case, I'm married with a wife and 2 young kids that I love and care for. My wife and I are constantly trying to juggle our time between taking care of the kids, doing our jobs, spending time with each other, taking care of ourselves, taking care of everything around the house, all without going crazy. And we are working our butts off to continue making payments on our fat mortgage that's literally making us have to try cutting expenses in pretty much every way possible in order to have our budget break even. And yet I decided this was the perfect time to bring home a bright red sports car. What a selfish and irresponsible idiot. Well, of course, there's more to the story than that, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. This video is probably going to be pretty long. There's a lot I want to talk about, so I might end up breaking it into multiple parts. We'll see. But anyway, to be honest, sometimes I actually don't like to bring this car out, and I don't like telling people I have it, because it can so easily give off the wrong impression. You show up somewhere in a cool car, and people automatically think you're rich, you're successful, and life is all good. And I really don't want this car to make anyone think my life is perfect, when I know without a doubt that it's not. Now, I didn't grow up dreaming of owning a Corvette, or really any car in particular. I knew growing up that money didn't come easy, and I remember my first car that I had way back in the day was an old hand-me-down truck from a relative. And it was unreliable, it broke down all the time, it was uncomfortable, and none of the cool kids at school wanted to ride with me, and I didn't care. To me, just the fact that I had a car at all was already just such a huge blessing. I couldn't ask for anything more. So even though I loved cars my whole life, the idea of wanting to own an extra car for fun simply never crossed my mind, and I definitely wasn't out on the market trying to look for one. So why did I get this car then? And why this particular C4 rather than one with maybe a manual transmission that's more fun to drive, or maybe a more collectible variant? And why did it all happen right now? So let's begin the story with this car's background. This Corvette's first owner was my wife's aunt, who lost her battle with cancer before I came in the picture. This aunt was a very influential figure in my wife's childhood as she grew up, and she told me a lot about her even though I never had a chance to meet her. After she passed away, her husband, my wife's uncle, continued driving the car for a little while until he himself was getting older and encountered some health issues also. He decided to pass the car on to my sister-in-law. Now, my sister-in-law travels very frequently. She lives and works in a big city where traffic and parking are constant problems. So her lifestyle simply didn't have room for an old sports car, as fun as it may be. So after she got the car, she drove it a few times and enjoyed it a little bit, and then put a cover over it and left it parked on the driveway at her parents' house. Now, this was back in about maybe 2019, around that time, and that's where the car sat until just a few months ago when I had it towed to the shop to be brought back to life. Now, let me ramble a little bit about myself. Like I said, I've been a car enthusiast pretty much my whole life. I've gone to literally hundreds of car shows and car meets, but I never really intended to own a cool car myself. I've always been a very practical person. Like I said, I grew up knowing that money doesn't come easy, so I've always known that cars are expensive to own and upkeep. They can be very high maintenance, very time consuming, and they're usually not the best financial investment for the most part. So I've always believed that it was wiser to simply focus on saving up money, buying a house eventually, which is a better investment, and making sure my family is all well cared for. I've always told people that if someday God were to give me the means of owning and caring for a cool car without compromising anyone or anything that's more important, I'd gladly do it. But it simply was never a priority for me. And plus, I can say from first-hand experience, going to so many car events, that the world of cars can just be so overly materialistic and so overly self-indulgent. There's so many people, and this is especially true since the rise of social media. There's so many people out there now who own the coolest cars, and yet they're so insecure, so immature, and just so desperate for attention. I really just don't want to come anywhere near being sucked into that culture. So I've always been content going to car events as a spectator and simply just enjoying appreciating other people's cars. I remember when my sister-in-law first got the car. The first time I saw it was during a family gathering, and I couldn't help but take a picture of it to show to all my friends. I know it's nothing exotic or rare or super special, but I just thought it was pretty cool to get to tell them, hey, check out my sister-in-law's new ride. My family has good taste. Then when my sister-in-law stopped driving it and she found out how crazy I was about cars and how much time I spent going to cars and coffee events, we started casually throwing around the idea of me possibly eventually acquiring the car, since I probably put it to much better use. Now, at that time I didn't think much of that idea. I kind of just brushed it off. Like I said, it never really crossed my mind that I would plan to own a sports car. But as I really thought about it, the idea really stuck. It really began to take root, and it really began to make sense. The C4 is worth pretty much nothing now. It's not particularly expensive to maintain. It runs very reliably if it's well cared for. And plus, they made these cars right here in America. They made so many of them. So parts are not impossible to find. There's a lot of people who work on them. And there's also a huge community of other enthusiasts and owners. Now, every time I go to car shows and see cool cars, it always makes me feel like a little kid. And I think that's how it's always going to be. But by that point in life, I was already married. We had our first kid, we bought a condo, I had a job with a stable income. And I realized for the first time ever that maybe the idea of owning a reasonably affordable, fun weekend car wasn't completely unrealistic after all.